guitar, so I was like, I'm gonna go and it's hard to press all the ladies, by the way, which that didn't help. But I started there, and it was $20. I could knock it out in 30 minutes. It was great. I was making $40 an hour. It's more than adults make, is what I was thinking. And she's like, if you could also just weed eat too while you're here, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. And that's taking me like an hour, but that's okay. It's like, well, there's kind of like the back part of the land, right? If you can make sure you mow that too. I'm like, I didn't even know that existed back there. It's like 2 acres. So now I'm up to like 2 hours, and I'm still getting paid $20. And I'm like, man, this sucks. And then she's like, to be honest, once you edge, there's kind of some grass in the driveway, so you could like blow that. And by then my mom was like, hang on, stop. Like, you can't do this. And that was like my first entrepreneurial lesson in what we call scope creep, right? Where you agree to do something, but then all of a sudden what you agreed to do kind of just gets a little bit bigger each time. And I applied that lesson later on in my life many, many times to make sure that doesn't happen again.
I love that. It's definitely an easy way to go from $40 an hour down to 10, right?
Have a real fast.
Yeah. So right after that, or not necessarily right after that, but still earlier on, you worked for a company here locally that then kind of stemmed into how you got into DialMaxx. So could you talk about that a little bit?
That's a good question. So when I was 15 years old, I was working on a project with my friend Ryan Brindley called Sista, which don't make fun of us. I thought it was just a great name. And then Disney came out with that show. You guys know what I'm talking about, Sista? Man, that ruined our whole thing. But I really needed servers. So part of being able to build this kind of web site and web profiles, being able to have servers. So I got online, chat with some of my friends on AIM. Anyone used AIM? It's dying, by the way, December, sorry to tell you. It's going away forever. But I love AIM. It's a big part of my childhood. And I was messaging some friends, like, you need to talk to Mark. Mark has this company in Huntsville called Digium. Anyone familiar with Digium? At the time, Digium was like 9 or 10 people. Is Timo here? Someone told a story when he almost fired me. But I'll tell it much more aggressively if he's not here.
Tell it your way, Brandon.
Okay, I will. So I was just looking for computers, and I met this guy, Mark, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to, I was just chatting with him online, like, I need this stuff, I need these servers, I'm working on this project. He was just asking me, like, what are you up to? I'm like, I'm programming, I'm young, I don't know anything about anything, I don't know what I'm doing. And he's like, why don't you come and hang out? Like, why don't we just go to lunch and I can just learn more about what you're doing, and then maybe I can just give you some servers. So I'm like, this is great. All I have to do is go to lunch and I can get free servers. Sounds good. So I'm leaving. I just turned 16. I was driving my grandma's 1987 Cutlass Supreme, which is surprisingly fast. And sorry, parents. It was pretty quick. And I was leaving the neighborhood, pulled up to my mom, and I'm like, yeah, this is great. I met this guy online that promised me like an opportunity. I just have to go meet him. And she's like, no. Absolutely, you cannot do that. And I was like, no, I promise. He's really well known in the community. She's like, I watched 2020 last night. You're going to be in Europe within 8 hours. So I was like, no, seriously, he's really well known. Just trust me. And she said, okay, go ahead. And just really opened up kind of my heart to Mark a little bit about what I was working on. He's like, you really should come and interview for Digium. And this was super cool, right? I was in high school. I didn't know anything about programming. In my own mind, I wasn't really valuable to an employer or something similar. But here was this guy, and also a young guy at 29, I think, at the time. And he was, actually, maybe Mark was younger than that. Maybe he was like 26. And he said, come and interview, and I went and interviewed with them. Timo said, you're a bright kid, you can at least go get some coffee for us. Now, I think it's important, though I told that about Matt. I didn't know anything about telephony, telecom, computers, programming. I was just interested, and generally, was just a young kid full of piss and vinegar, so I was excited. And they saw that, and they're like, well, we can hire a young kid full of piss and vinegar, you can go get coffee for us. He said, we'll offer you $8 an hour. I said, you know what? That doesn't sound too bad. How about 12? He's like, 8, take it or leave it. And Timo, I still joke with him about the day. I'm like, you were so harsh, man. That was brutal. And of course, I just crumbled immediately. Okay, yeah, 8's fine, 8's fine. I started to work for Digium for a while, and that's how I got my start kind of in the telecom space, just going and getting coffee for people that were much more important than me, but also learning a ton of information. I kind of felt, I told Matt this earlier, I was like, you idiots, you're paying me, and I'm able to come in here and learn all this information that I can use for the rest of my life and really train me. There are people that pay money to get education where I'm actually getting paid, albeit a little bit above minimum wage. They also gave us some Red Bull and Skittles and stuff, so it evened out pretty well. But it was good.
So you go work with Mark and Timo at Digium for a little while, and then at some point you kind of get this idea to work on your own side project, right? And so Mark was kind of the main person who influenced you that maybe, hey, you should leave what you're doing now, even though it's working for him for kind of cheap, and go do your own thing. So what was that reference like? Like, what was it like for him to just say, hey man, go fly, it's your time?
Well, I was always interested in some of the stuff that Digium wasn't doing, primarily long distance. We had so many customers. Digium had millions of customers that used Asterisk, their phone system. Does anyone know what Asterisk is? I saw Randy. I know he knows. Oh wow, that's a lot of people. That's pretty cool. And they weren't really interested in doing that. They are now though. It's kind of funny. But I was like working on some kind of, Matt called it my side hustle, but I was doing some consulting on the side. I literally just looking on Craigslist to find stuff where I could apply this knowledge. Hey, David. That I just recently learned at Digium and see if I can make a little bit of extra money. And Mark really told me it was the wildest thing because putting myself in his shoes, I don't know if I would have done the same thing yet. A young, growing company. At that point, I had been at Digium for a couple of years. I actually learned a few things and I was able to provide some value and be part of the team. And I said, I'm thinking about leaving. And he said the opposite of what I thought anyone would say that would be my boss, the owner of a company. He said, you really should do it. He's like, you'll never have another chance or an opportunity where your only bill is like your T-Mobile bill and your Taco Bell bill. And you don't have any kids, you don't have a mortgage, you should just do it. And if it doesn't work out, you can come back and I'll hire you. And I'm very grateful to Mark for that opportunity. And that really was the encouragement that I needed. My family was very encouraging at that time. But it's the encouragement I needed from Mark to say, like, you should pursue this because you won't have a chance in the future where it will be as easy. You'll be able to do it in the future, but it will just be a little bit more difficult. I know what that's like now, and I still think it's very possible, but that was very encouraging for Mark to say, and that's when I kind of took the leap. And even taking the leap, I worked part-time at Digium for almost a year while I was doing this on the side. I hired my first employee before I quit Digium. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around that, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later, but there's so many misconceptions around what it means to start a company, where it's like quit, go get a fancy office, even if that is at Huntsville West, I'm not discriminatory, it's true. Like sometimes you don't need the office, you just need to start your side hustle, stop, put down the excuses of why things aren't working, and then just continue to iterate over things until you find something that finally feels like it's fitting in place. And that's a process. It's something that I think failure is a tremendously exciting thing for me. And we always use the joke of failing fast, failing quickly. It's true. Like when I try something, I really want to know if it works fast, and then I want to be able to change it if it doesn't. And then eventually it will work out, right? I get just this little tidbit about Sarah Blakely, who's the founder of Spanx. Any women in the house know Spanx? Any men in the house know Spanx? Maybe. I do. They're starting men's Spanx, probably a good idea. But Sarah Blakely started this company. It's a multi-billion-dollar company now, very well known. She had no experience. She was a fax salesman. I'm glad she stopped doing that, right? Because that's a tough business now to sell fax machines. It's really hard these days. And she started this company. She didn't tell her family about it for a year, which I always thought was fascinating, right? I was listening to her in this podcast, which I suggest you guys go check out. And she said, I didn't tell my family because I knew if they said something discouraging, like what kind of self-awareness do you have to know, if I tell my dad, or if I tell my mom, if I tell my sister, they're going to discourage me and I won't do it, right? She knew herself well enough to know that could happen. So instead of trying to figure out how to just be tough and stand ground, she's like, I'm just not going to tell them for, a year. So a year goes by in Spanx, and she's still in the concept phase, but she's got some prototypes and stuff. By then she's in it, right? I mean, she's tons of time into it, tons of resources. And she tells her family, and her dad says, well, 9 out of 10 businesses fail, right? It's just statistics. And she said, well, I'm already too far in this thing, right? You're already invested. You're not going to give up. The sunk cost bias is the fancy term we use. But I thought the same thing about myself, where when someone told me 9 out of 10 businesses fail, to me it was very simple math, right? I just have to start 10 companies, and one of them will be successful. And I really feel like I can sit here and say that I have done that. And my odds were not too much better than 9 out of 10 failures. Maybe it was 8 out of 10 failures, but it was really close. And that's just what it takes. So I see people, I really like to relate it to playing an instrument. Does anyone here play any instrument at all? Isn't it kind of, that's actually not a lot of people. But it's kind of interesting whenever you talk to someone like, yeah, I tried guitar. I mean, I just can't do it. I'm like, of course you can't do it, you idiot. You know what I mean? Like, that's why it takes practice. Sorry, I'm going to be a little bit aggressive in this talk. Or play piano or drums or anything else. It takes lots of time and practice and patience to really be able to master that craft, and even to do anything that sounds remotely pleasing to someone's ears. You know what I mean? I'm sure most parents can relate to that for kids that are going through that. One parent can over here, I think, yeah. So I think that's a pretty important part, is that knowing yourself and that self-awareness to know enough when to tell people and when not to tell people, because in general people, they really do want the best for you, but sometimes that can be bad advice on both sides. Sometimes 9 out of 10 businesses fail. Sometimes, honey, this is a great idea when they think it's stupid, right? So you got to be careful with your family and friend advice. It can get you a little bit sometimes.
Love that. That's great advice. And also just talking about, the many different businesses. I mean, I think that anybody that's in entrepreneurship has had some little experiences if you really think back on it. I think back to high school, and I almost forgot that I installed alarm systems in people's cars for a little while. Yeah. I was not very skilled at that. Like, I definitely had some people coming back multiple times to fix things or whatnot. Somebody's cruise control went out. Oh, sure. So it's one of those things, that's where you learn, right? But no, one thing you mentioned there was you didn't just go 0 to 100 with DialMaxx, right? Like, you kind of slowly edged into it. You didn't just say, hey, Mark, F this, I'm out. Like, I'm out the door, I'm doing my own thing now. You went to him for advice. Through great leadership from Mark, he advised that you do pursue this path. And then you kind of transitioned slowly, and you said you hired your first employee while you were still at Digium. So as you started to begin in DialMaxx and really start to move into things, talk a little bit about the beginning stages of DialMaxx and kind of how you ramped up that business to where you eventually exited.
That's also a good question. And so just from a 30,000-foot view, we had built the company from when I was in boxer shorts all the way up to selling to a publicly traded company, Matic Jack, in my parents' basement. We never moved out and got office space, which again is kind of against the Huntsville West thing. But kind of the point was, and this is, I promise I'll get into this in the future, the reason why this whole place exists. But whenever we went to get office space, it was expensive. It was like $5,000 to get space for everybody, and it was like a 5-year lease. And I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to be alive in 5 years from now. I can't commit to something like that. And for $5,000, I can hire a really good person. I can hire a really good developer or someone to come in and help with support. So there was always that kind of nagging feeling. But in the very beginning of DialMaxx, we started, and I was in a long distance business, which I think this is important to note, because I kind of give a similar talk at high school or college. People are like, talk about the Lamborghini, talk about fast cars. I'm like, no. I mean, that is cool. I think that's good, to aspire to have as a goal or whatever. But I think what's the most interesting piece is how much I didn't know and still don't know, and how much that just doesn't matter, because the person that shows up and does the work is who wins. So I started this long distance company. I just had talked to my friend in Orlando.
And mind you, this is not 2017. Long distance was a thing then.
It was, yeah. Long distance was actually still a thing. Yeah, we'd be dead right now if we wouldn't have sold that company. So I'm very thankful for that. But this is in 2008, 2009. Carriers still paid long distance between each other and stuff, and office spaces still paid long distance per minute. So we were working at this company, this inbound call center for Sprint in Orlando that my friend had owned. I just happened to meet. I'm not actually sure how I met him, but he was a friend on MySpace. And you guys know that?
Oh my God, it's so old.
Dang, that's gone. I'm dating myself now. I'm actually 50. But we're on MySpace, and he was like, yeah, I'm having this. I'm like, he just reached out to me because he had telecom problems. And he's like, my biggest problem is my long distance bill. It's super expensive. I'm like, well, Digium sells this phone system. It's really cheap. He's like, it's not the problem. The problem is I have the cheap phone system. Calling people is expensive, and receiving a whole bunch of calls from people with support is really expensive. I'm like, okay. How much do you spend? It's like $20,000 a month for inbound long distance for 800 numbers and stuff. I'm like, okay. How much do you want to spend? He's like, less than that. Mind you, I'm just making this up as I go, right? Like I'm on the phone with him, like, okay, how can I help? In the beginning of the call, I was selling him one thing, but by the end, I sold him something else, neither of which I had, right? Neither of which existed in the slightest at all. So he said, yeah, long distance is the problem. I'm paying 2 cents a minute to AT&T. It sucks. I need to do something. I'm like, okay. Let me talk to my staff and my people and my associates and my council and my board, and then I'll get right back to you, right? And I mean, I'm just in my boxers in my basement with the Disney Channel on the TV, and I'm like, okay. So I call AT&T, and I'm like, how much longer? It's like 2 cents a minute. I'm like, okay, I'm talking to a salesman. And he's like, what kind of discounts can I get on that? He's like, nothing, we're AT&T, go away, which is pretty much how they are. I'm like, okay, who are your guys' biggest competitors? He's like, well, Verizon is pretty crazy, and they're pretty active in the long distance space. I'm like, do you have their phone number by chance? And of course he hung up on me. Now, this is an interesting note, right? I kept calling, well, I'll get to that in a second. I call Verizon, how much do you charge for long distance for 800 inbound? Well, it depends on your volume. I'm like, okay. He's like, how much volume are you doing? I'm like, I'll get back to you. So like I hang up, I call my friend back, how much volume are you doing? He's like, oh, we're doing, like 500,000 minutes a month. Oh, okay, cool, yeah. I'm relaying this to my staff so they can help me project some financials, and I'll call you right back. I call Verizon back, I'm like, 500,000, like, okay, that's not bad, we can do that for 1.2 cents. And I'm like, dang, okay, this is great. So I call my friend back, and he's like, all right, what we got? I'm like, well, I think we can do it for 1.5 cents. And then like, there was like, I don't know where I got that number from, like, it's more than 1.2, and it's half between 1 and 2. There was no rhyme or reason, right? My point to the whole story is that like, you don't have to have a plan for a lot of these things, right? A lot of you just have to go and execute. And then after that, we had ways, how we've charged customers. We had a formula, we had process and procedure, and we had all this kind of stuff. We knew about what margins we needed in the product. But in the beginning, you don't need to know what margins you have. The market will help you. What I mean by that is that if you're not selling it for enough, you will not make money, the natural thing of the market. So we grew it. We got that first client. We were selling 1.5 cents a minute. I'm like, this is great. I'm just getting this bill from him. I'm passing it off, paying someone else less. I'm shaking it. Some changes falling out the bottom. And I called that Verizon guy back. I'm like, done. Like, we're in. Let's do this deal. He's like, well, just sign this NDA and then we'll be able to send you over our contract. I'm like, I'm going to ask a question, and I mean this seriously. What is an NDA? He's like, well, it's a non-disclosure agreement. And what's cool is that every time I called the Verizon call center back to talk to a salesperson, I talked to somebody different, right? So I'm like, this is Brandon with ABC Company 123, and I need, to do this thing. Like, well, what's your ASR and ACD ratios? And I'm like, 1 second, I'll call you back. And I'll call my friend and ask him the question. And I did this like 10 times, seriously, before we finally got a contract that said 1.2. And I was like, great, now we're in business, right? Now we have something, now we have a little bit of cash flow. I mean, immediately with that first client, I was making more money than I was making at Digium. And I made the decision to hire somebody, and then eventually, right after that, quit and work on it full time for myself. But it didn't have to, I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have a plan at all, clearly. I was just willing to be persistent and do something that a lot of people aren't comfortable with, because I realized that my dad told me something when I was a lot younger. He's like, Brandon, you're special. Of course, my mom tells me that, but it means something different, right? You're so special. Who couldn't love a face like that? My dad does not tell me the same things. So he told me, it's interesting because you have a technical background, but you can still talk to people. And a lot of times those are not in the same category. You have people that are good at talking and relaying information and communicating, and people that are good at programming and working on technology and systems and stuff. And I realized that I was at a pretty big advantage there of just being able to have conversations with customers and relay some of that technical information. And I also realized that they don't care. Like, in the beginning, I wanted to teach them about telecom. Like, look, well, I'm not going to use that word. Look, dude, I don't care. All I want is for my bill to go down. Just make it happen. So we were able to build a pretty cool business on that, up to, I think we ended up at maybe 10 people, all in my parents' basement. It was a little bit crazy there for a while. It was a little bit packed. But it was a ton of fun, man. And should I just go right into the next piece?
Well, so I just want to touch on something real quick.
Brandon said you don't really have to have a plan to start. You'll figure it out as you go along, and the market will kind of self-correct. There was an interesting conversation with me several years ago in business where I was at this big expo, and we had all these, different people around, that vendors that I work with and things like this. And we're at the after party, and one of them kind of slides over and says, "Hey, Matt, so you've been doing this for a while. At what point did you actually figure out how to make money?" I'm like, "That's a really weird question. I'm in business. What do you mean when I figure out how to make money?" He's like, "Yeah, you've always sold stuff. But at what point did you actually figure out how to make money?" And that's when I realized that he was cornering, like, how to run an effective business. How not to just up it 3 cents from the other thing and be like, well, it's more than the cost, right? So I'm making money. And be able to stabilize for long term. And like Brendan said, it's one of those things that you'll get in, you might not make very much money at first because you don't really know what you're doing, and that's okay. you will adjust over time and you'll figure out where that sweet spot is, either for your structure or you'll have less structure so that you can have a smaller margin and lower pricing, right? But that's something that you will figure out. So having all the formulas and the procedures and everything that you figured out with DialMaxx over time, that just kind of comes with experience, right? And now it's great if you can start with a little bit of a plan there, but sometimes you just have to walk in, mark it at 0.3 cents and keep going, right? So that's really cool that you did that. And also the other big thing there too is just the perseverance that Brandon has to call somebody back. How many of you would call a giant company like Verizon and start asking these kind of questions? It'd be rather intimidating, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was easy,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm like, they don't know who I am, they don't care, and every time I call, I get somebody else.
But to be able to call them back 10 times, well, meanwhile, you might have that self-perception of yourself in your boxers in your basement, right? And you're calling this huge multi-million-dollar company, asking them to buy their services and then resell it on the side, which it's just one of those things that takes guts, right? And that perseverance to continue to call back and figure it out as you go along. And I think that's the heart of the entrepreneur spirit. So yeah, I did want you to jump into the next part there on how you kind of scaled that up, and then at what point somebody actually became interested enough in you to go, hey man, I think we want to acquire you, and how that conversation went.
That was interesting. So we grew. We had a lot of people. I siphoned off a lot of good talent from Digium. Sorry guys, and some of those people went back, but we were doing well. We were scaling well. Still in my boxer shorts, and for most days I had to kind of dress it up to like gym shorts after that, but scaled, and we randomly got a message from Magiccheck. One of the biggest things that I was always a fan of, which is super rare in Huntsville, is kind of this concept of radical transparency, which means that I loved to just tell everybody about everything that I was doing. Like I was just an open book, ask me questions, but also I'm going to show you all of our intellectual property, because I always thought that was kind of BS. And then we're much better than everybody in the long distance space, so we'll be able to adapt. We'll always be ahead of everybody, right? So yes, if we give up a little bit of an advantage and some competitor can catch up, as long as they're always following me, I don't really care. Which I think is an important part. It's so easy to focus on competition, but it's just such a waste of time. So we had published this little blog on bkruse.com. It's just like a little WordPress blog, is free. And I was like, here's how we do call routing in a really efficient way that's better than everybody else, and everybody else is stupid. And then a lot of people from the industry reached out to me and I kind of realized why it was so much better, because we weren't doing a lot of the checks and stuff that they were doing. Oops. Anyways, it got the attention of this guy, Dan Borslow, who was the owner and founder of Magiccheck. A long history in telecom, had sold TelSave to AOL back in 1992, and then started this new company, Magiccheck, because he told me, quote, I was down to 30 million and running out of money, which I thought was kind of funny. West Palm Beach people, man. So he was started this company, called me, he's like, tell me more about this. And I really thought I was pitching a customer, right? So I put on my sales hat. I'm like, oh, our products is great. We're better than everybody else. We're so smart. Blah, 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 blah. He's like, okay, that's interesting. I'll call you back in an hour with a proposal. And I'm like, wait, I thought I was supposed to send you like something, like a proposal or something. And he sends us over an offer letter. And it was absolutely wild. I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I really didn't take it seriously at first. This is also something interesting. We actually said no the first time around, and he was extremely persistent. Dan unfortunately passed away a couple years ago, but I just had talked to the M&A attorney, the merger and acquisition attorney from their side about 3 months ago. We were just going through some stuff and kind of had some nostalgia on the event. And he told me, like, Dan just told me, do whatever it takes to get the deal done, which is very unusual for Dan. He's usually very scrupulous and very detail-oriented. And he said, I don't care, just make sure you acquire this kid, get his people, get his technology and his customers, and bring him down to West Palm Beach. So we said no. We said, like, no, and we countered. And I was like, I still want to work on my own products. I want to stay in Huntsville, and I don't want to get rid of any of my team members because they really helped me get to this point, and he was like, okay, keep working on your products, stay in Huntsville, keep your team members, I don't care, like, when are we going to do this deal? And I remember him telling me, he said, at some point in time, you need to put on the big boy britches, step up to the plate, and take a swing, kid, and I was kind of like, yes, sir. But he was right. And went through that deal. I think an important part, though, is just rewinding it back, like, probably a few years when I was still 16 or 17, I was doing consulting. I was actually getting sued by one of my previous consulting clients for what they said was stealing one of their customers, an intellectual property violation, all this kind of crap that was just crap. But looking back on it now, it's hilarious. But Those guys are so stupid. But, it was interesting because was going through that, and that was the toughest time of my life, because it was like my parents were both working with me and helped me pushing this thing forward. I had a lot of people relying on me. It really graduated into something that we had a lot of customers and people that relied on us. And then we were getting sued, like the house was in foreclosure, like we had to choose between paying our attorney in Chicago or a utility bill or food or the mortgage. And it was a really hard time. But I'm so thankful for that time because it really gives me perception, it helps give me perspective. I look back in that time, and now, like in high school, my friend's like, oh man, Susie Q dumped me. And I'm like, bro, I'm getting sued. I have to appear in court.
Can you pause and just reiterate that for everybody real quick?
Just the perception?
Just the brevity of that situation that you're in.
Yeah, I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my family. I know my mom will probably start tearing up, but it was just like, how are we going to do this? You know what I mean? Like, we're about to, like the house is in the paper, like we're about to get foreclosed on. My dad used to say every night he goes to sleep, he could hear the house chomping away at money. It was living and breathing and eating. And it was an awesome thing to, on the other side, I've gone through that, get acquired and then pay off the house, which was cool. But at the time it was horrible. Like it was the worst thing I had gone through. There were so many things in the negative. There was so much stress to bear. It was so difficult to bear. And now that I'm on the other side of it, though, and have been through, I would say, equally traumatizing events, it helps put things in perspective. So at that point, it was like literally wondering maybe where the next meal will come from and getting our house taken away and being on the streets, to now when I have problems, it's just all relative, right? Even if I have problems where my company's failing, I'm just kind of like, I'm going to work really hard at it, but I'm not going to let it kill me. I'm not going to let it really get to me and stop me. Like a lot of people get paralyzed in that kind of stress to where they make no action, and that's probably the worst possible thing you could do. So yeah, I really took that opportunity to make sure, again, my friend, Susie Q broke up with my bro. We're in high school, like, there's like 1 million girls in this school, like there's 1 billion girls in the world, literally billions of women. Surely you can find one, and if you can't, like, you'll be fine. But I'm getting sued, you know what I mean? Like, I could go to jail or something, I don't even know. It helped put things in perspective, and I just remember that from talking to someone. It's like, I don't want to downplay prayer at all, but please pray for me because my computer has a virus. I'm like, dude, you know what I mean? Getting sued, you know what I mean? Like, download McAfee, you'll be fine, you know what I mean? I can't download McAfee and take my lawsuit away, you know what I mean? It just helps put things in perspective. I see what people stress about now, and we joke, I think as adults even, we look at kids in high school, like, they're so stupid, like, what they're worrying about, or like if this person likes me or doesn't like, and we do the same thing, but as adults, except I get to see it, like, I'm really worried about this, and I'm like, really? Are you? Like, there's a difference between being concerned and knowing what you should focus on because it's a problem, and then being stressed over something that's really not worth being stressed over. And there's just nothing that's worth being stressed over because there's just things you can't control. So that was a really interesting turning point in being acquired by Magic Jack. So I literally went from, and this is, I think, hopefully an encouraging story, but I went from being foreclosed on, paying my attorney, not sure if we'd be able to eat and pay utilities, to like a multimillionaire before I was 21 in like 9 months. It's just crazy how fast things can turn around. And of course, you might say, well, what have you done since then? I've been a really big disappointment since then. I kind of peaked early, like peaked at 20, and I'm just on my way downhill, so I'm sorry. There's nothing else after that.
So I love that. It is really one of those almost rags to riches stories, right? But when you're in the stress of the moment, I think plenty of people would have understood if you said, you know what, we've got to eat. We can't pay the attorney. It's less important, right? But you kind of took that gamble, you took that bet, and that's what led ultimately to your success in that situation. So going through that whole process from being at Digium, starting DialMaxx, exiting DialMaxx, who else was kind of behind you, besides Mark Spencer, that kind of helped you get through these areas as your mentors and other influencers in your life?
That's a great question, and something I really want to highlight. Mark was great, but once I had kind of quit, he was like, good luck, little duckling, you know what I mean? And not in a bad way, just like I got a company to run with, 150 people, so excuse me if I'm busy, so I understand. But it actually was a girl that I was sort of dating at the time, and if she's watching, I'm sorry. Like, we were really dating, but sort of dating at the time. And it just so turns out that I was posting on Facebook about some of these problems, because MySpace was dead, Facebook was in. And I was just posting, man, I really having problems like finding a good business bank. Like I went to send an $80,000 wire at Redstone, and they literally took me. Is anyone here from Redstone? I'm so sorry. Oh my bad. They took me in the back room and like thought I was a terrorist. Like, why are you sending this money to Europe? I'm like, it's literally to like, I mean, I can't remember the name of the company now. The biggest British telecom, biggest telecom company in Europe. Like, it's not. I'm not wiring money to Al Qaeda or something, right? And then I just was voicing this on Facebook, like, this is such a pain, and like, I need to find someone who really understands this. And this guy Curry Knight reached out to me. Does anyone know Curry by chance? Oh, right on. Or Discovery.com, his company in Huntsville. They might predate a lot of you guys being in the space, but they sold to Nokia back in 2002. It was a huge Huntsville exit. It was really successful. And also the telecom space. And I'm like, he just messaged me and said, let's go to lunch. You know, and I'd never heard about this guy before. I wouldn't say he exists in the shadows, but you know, he had his big exit, and then he's not kind of back in the company world, right? He's just sailing around the world or doing what he does, which is literally what he does. He's like, let me take you to lunch. And I learned at that point the value of this mentor relationship. You know, one is he really taught me protocol, which is very nice of him. It's just small things, right? Like, you know, don't be late, show up. Just like he got. I realize now, being on the other side of it, he got so much fulfillment out of doing that. It is so much fun to talk to people about what issues they're working through, and even if you don't have any impact, a lot of times just voicing that concern is enough for them to process it and work it out in their head. So I would meet with him for lunch only once a month, and he would just say like, maybe here's some stuff you could do, and here's some stuff you shouldn't worry about. And I was telling about this stuff, like I'm so worried about taxes. I'm so worried about taxes and accounting. Like I just am not good at that. He's like, are you making more money than you made last month? And I was like, yes. He's like, that's the only thing you should worry about. And then hire an accountant. He will take care of everything for you, which Warren Averett represents here in the house. He's a little too expensive now, by the way. But it was really amazing going through that process and having that person that has been through that before, because it's just such specific advice that you're asking from someone. But what's funny is everybody has an opinion. Like I see Name Hill, like doctor represent. You know, if I gave someone medical advice, I might actually be put in jail or something. It's extremely irresponsible for me to give someone medical advice, you know. If you have any medical questions, I'm just kidding. Actually, yeah, that's right, for a proxy. But I went through this phase and I just realized so many people had opinions, right? And as an entrepreneur, you have to develop what I call the signal to noise ratio. You have to develop the ability to determine what's complete garbage that people will tell you, because there's a lot of that, and then what's actually applicable. And it's not just about someone's history or something. It's just, you just have to learn to get that gut feel. Really count to where we would have went out of business if I would not have taken Curry's advice. So I'm extremely thankful for people like that. I have had many more people since then, like Jim Hudson, that really poured into me. But I've kind of learned about this secret society a little bit in Huntsville, if that's something I can chat about.
We're running a little short on time, so let's
kind of jump a little forward. You know, so after you go through, you get out. You've worked with all these people. You've learned a lot of things over time. You even worked for Magic Jack a little bit, and then you came back to Huntsville. So what made you get into things like Huntsville West, where we're at, and doing Comment Sold? Just kind of in brief, what interested you in those businesses and kind of got you started in them?
That's also a good question. Matt, give it up for Matt. I mean, he has just been so good. He's awesome. So went through that. I came back to Huntsville, and in West Palm Beach, and some time I spent in Chicago and New York, there were co-working spaces everywhere. It was like Starbucks, right? And if anyone's ever been to West Palm Beach, there's like, you either on the island or you're not on the island, and like all these really cool small co-working spaces existed off the island, right? Where like you weren't next to the Pillsbury or the Walgreens, you were just like in it with everybody else, like all the normal people. And I came back to Huntsville, and there was just no space like that. I'm like, you know what? The same problem that I had when I started DialMaxx still exists today, which is if I need office space and I'm a really young startup and I'm very uncertain in my future and revenue and team and profit, I really can't afford to do a 5-year lease. I really can't afford to pay a few $1,000s a month. I really need to find something cheaper, which is where this idea came out of. Like, you know, it doesn't really matter where the location's at. DialMaxx, we never actually met one of our customers, but that's kind of crazy to think about now. At Comment Sold, I've met lots of my people that I work with and customers, including one here tonight, represent. But we never met anyone, so it didn't matter where I was, right? I didn't have to be in a nice fancy high rise. And now this is cool. Like being in a place, like rip everything out, paint the ceiling black, and like let my mom loose on IKEA and Home Goods, and boom, like this is what you end up with. So I was just like, I just want to have a place where if I can have a cheap cost basis, and this, I run Huntsville West with Antonio just like a business, right? Where we tried the private desk room. That's a minimally viable product. Start the private desk room, see how it goes. Okay, we realized after 2 weeks, everyone literally hates it. It's the worst idea ever. Okay, let's change it to something besides a private desk room. We constantly kind of look at things like that. And since our cost basis was so low here, we're able to offer this kind of collaborative community starting at $50 a month where you like come in, work with other people. You don't have to even know them. You don't have to talk to them. There's just something about going into an environment, getting up, going into an environment and working with other people every day, even if you're not working with them at all and you have no idea what they're doing. There's something about that energy that's extremely intoxicating. And the reason I come here every day personally, it's just something that I missed from West Palm Beach, Florida, because the truth is, entrepreneurship is very lonely. It's very lonely, it's very segregating from the rest of your life in social communities, and you're just kind of built to be like, how are things going? Oh, it's awesome, because I really can't tell you because you wouldn't understand, and the advice would be horrible. So now you come into an environment like this, and it's like, oh, I can actually talk to these people about like, here's the problems I'm really facing. They're like, you know what? I've faced the same problem before, and this is how I went about it. You can kind of make that decision. So that's where the general idea of Huntsville West has come about, and it's just way exceeded my wildest expectations. I thought if it doesn't work out, I'll just make it into my own personal office because it'd be pretty badass. But this would be just a long desk with just me at the end. But it did work out, and it was extremely well accepted by you guys in the community. It's been an absolute blast. The most fulfilling thing I've done to see that come to fruition and really grow.
Thank you. And for those not familiar too, Comment Sold is the software that Brandon has built largely to help his wife's business operate and run more effectively than the platform they were using before. Yeah. And then he spun that off into an incredible business very quickly. How many boutiques do you have using this software right now?
2,000.
Wow.
2,000. And you really launched Comment Sold, like started actually selling it when?
In April.
So that's incredible growth.
Well, if I can, I know we're like way over time, and if you want to leave, just leave. It won't hurt my feelings. But I think this is important, right? Because this is the actual application. So many questions people say, like, okay, that's great, I understand, but like, how do I do it? And this is a great example, right? So my wife started this clothing company, Discount Divas. Anyone know Discount Divas? Represent, nice. Some men raised their hands, so my bad. Sorry about that. You might recognize the package on the front door, but what's interesting is that she had this company where she was just sending PayPal invoices to people. She would post a product on Facebook, and she would just send a PayPal invoice. And she was literally like, I've hired someone to just send PayPal invoices. I'm like, that's so stupid. Like, I can automate all that. I can do it in like an hour, like 2 hours tops. So here I am 2 years later, and I'm still working on it. It was way more difficult than I thought it would be. So that's a typical software development problem. But she told me, you know what, and even me, right, as an entrepreneur, someone who'd been through this, I was discouraging. I have to reflect on that and say, like, Brandon, you idiot, which I say that a lot. She said, I want to start a company. I'm like, okay, she was a nurse in the ER. I want to start a company. I have no entrepreneurial experience. I'm going to sell clothes to women, online. I'm like, literally millions of people doing that. Shopify has 500,000 people identical to you. And I'm glad she didn't listen to anything I said. And she started Discount Divas, and that was in November of 2014 in a Facebook group. And they scaled tremendously. They're doing a little over $1 million a month now in sales, of which the bulk of that comes from a Facebook group. It's just absolutely insane. So it was born out of a real problem. Like, the problem was, I'm trying to send invoices and I can't keep up with this. Surely there's a better way. And I know it's like kind of stupid to say, but that's exactly how Comment Sold was started. And I was like, I wonder if you're having this problem, if there's other ladies out there who are also running their boutique or something similar, selling on Facebook, and need the same kind of social selling component. And that's really how it started, and we've had awesome adoption because we've solved like a really significant problem for a lot of people, or for a decent amount of people. So it's been a lot of fun.
So that kind of segues into my next question. I'm sorry, Tony, which a couple minutes more here. Brandon's such a good storyteller, I don't want to cut him off. Sure. All right, workshops are kicking off, guys. If there was something you had in mind, and you looked at the schedule up front, if you go right out in the lobby, all the workshops are listed right there on the wall. Covalence is starting now? Okay. Okay, so if you want to go to the coding boot camp or any of the other events that are kicking off now, you feel free to go ahead and leave, or anytime during the rest of this, if you guys just need to leave or exit the room, please feel free. I just don't want to cut him off just yet because he's just throwing some value out there for you all. So what you just said did segue kind of my next question here. And I want to know what you think most entrepreneurs or those that are in startups, what are their most common mistakes when they first get going? You know, you hit on that you found these real problems that exist and you're trying to solve these, right? And there's just kind of a light bulb idea for you. You're like, well, we can solve that, right? But, you know, what else do you see from other startups out there or entrepreneurs that you feel like are obvious no-nos when they get going?
That's a really good question. And I got to think about this a lot and also apply it to my life multiple times where I make these mistakes. The first one is that money will not fix the problem. Now, if you're in a company and you need to, acquire some stuff or whatever, and you have more revenue, absolutely, sales fixes all problems. But in terms of getting investment capital, so many people use that as a crutch. Discount Divas, $12 million this year in sales, probably a $20 or $30 million company. They had no startup capital at all. TauMax, no startup capital at all. It just takes time. Now, there are some businesses that really do need that. But for the most part, by far, you can do it without it. That's probably the number one mistake. So people use that as kind of a crutch. The second one is trying to scale too fast because you don't quite know what you're doing, and you will always be in that state. Yes, Thomas Holt has 2,000 boutiques. Yes, things are going decently well. I have still no idea. All I know is what we're planning on doing next month, and that's it. Facebook could change tomorrow, business is gone. We're trying to diversify away from that, but that's kind of the problem you have to keep in mind. But I see people that are like, I liquidated my kid's 401k, I got an office, I got a nameplate, I got a phone, a desk phone. I'm like, who has a desk phone anymore? But okay, I got a desk phone, I have a secretary. I'm like, I almost use that again. I'll say it, I think it's relevant here, but I'm like, bitch, you don't have any clients. You know what I mean? You have no revenue. You know what I mean? This is not a good investment, generally, at all, ever. So people, I think a lot of times it's the fake it till you make it, which there is an aspect to that. Perception is reality. When we were pitching to clients in Orlando, they didn't know that I was in my boxers in the basement. They don't have to know. That's okay. You can use that to your advantage. But don't trick yourself in that perception is reality where you think if you set yourself up to look like a successful business, that the money will follow, because it doesn't, ever. Is the kind of the biggest mistake that I have, or that I see people making a lot. And the third one is really, having to do with the excuses where it's like, I don't have enough time, or I need a co-founder. I need someone to do this piece, so I'm not going to move forward until I have this piece worked out. And the truth is, you'll have a lot of pieces that are just not going to fit sometimes, and at different seasons of that business in your startup, it will work out. So you just have to be persistent. I think it's amazing how people aren't persistent. And I really relate it to Matt, right, who's super shredded. And earlier today, actually, someone was like, yeah, you're looking did you see something over there you don't want to eat that? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm on a diet. And then they laughed. And I'm like, wow. But if Matt says that, they're like, oh yeah, you're cutting, because you both can cut. You know what I mean? Man, he's got it going on. But I see the same kind of thing happen in startups as well, where they rely too much on someone else to get that work done for them. In the very beginning, it really is you, right? And you have to be that one to push it forward. And then things scale from there. And a lot of things you read in business books and stuff are mainly about scaling these companies and how to deal with management struggles and blah, blah, blah. You can only dream to be there, right? And that's exactly what, and I'm the same way. I dream to be in that state again with another company. But really focusing on the very, very beginning, I think that's what people really lack, just work on getting customers and getting revenue, and you can kind of work the rest of the pieces of the puzzle out. Even if the company you end up building is totally different than what you started with. Not a lot of people know that Twitter started as a podcast syndication company. Why they didn't stick with that? I'm sure Jack Dorsey's glad he didn't stick with that. And they turned into this social network almost by accident. They were running out of money, venture money they raised, and they were like, let's just take a stab at something different. And then Twitter came from that, which is pretty cool.
So a couple of things I do want to reiterate there that, you started without a lot of startup capital. And I would say, that I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs that have done the same thing with my very self. Started a couple companies with probably less than most of you have in your bank accounts right now. And it just comes to, one, that desire and that drive to do it. And then kind of the other thing you hit on is, if you're familiar with the book, The Lean Startup, is that minimally viable product. When you're an entrepreneur and you're just getting going, I think a lot of times you hit the nail on the head. You are that minimally viable product, right? You wear all of the hats. You do all the things. Your marketing, your accounting, your HR, your sales, your whatever it has to be, right? And so sometimes you don't have the cash to hire that secretary, and you just have to work 10 more hours a week to get those things done or to schedule things out or find something that can assist you. But at the end of the day, you do what has to be done. Entrepreneurs are very resourceful. I think is the biggest thing you hit on there, at finding ways to get things done by whatever means necessary, right? And so I think that's huge. So I just kind of want to close up here with a couple things. One specifically, as far as what have you looked to over time as far as books or maybe other entrepreneurs that you follow, kind of their example or the kind of content they put out? What has been most helpful for you over time, looking at those areas that's maybe been skills that you've added or just kind of motivation, whatever?
I've said that's a good question every time, and I'll say that's a good question, and it is. For me, it's very much having personal accountability, which a lot of times can come on behalf of a mentor, a lot of times can come on behalf of another company that's starting up. It's so easy when you control your own story to tell people, what's going on and what you're doing, and none of it can be true, and they really can't tell you anything different. It's kind of like your teacher saying, "Did you do your homework?" You're like, "Yes," and they're like, "Well, let me see it." "Oh crap, no, I didn't do my homework." The truth is, there's no accountability. There's no more people looking over your shoulder, so you have to be that person. A lot of times it's just really nice to have somebody that just checks up on you like once a month that you go and talk to and say, "You know what, I really should have been executing these things, but I haven't been." Instead of being proactive and stuff I know I should be doing, I'm reactive. I just wait for emails to come in and I just react to them all day. But I listen to a lot of these things. Audible is a really good resource for me for books. It's super cheap. I have a guy in China that can get you any book for like 90 cents. It's probably illegal, but it works great. And it all comes in on Audible. And then podcasts. There's like a few podcasts. Gary Vaynerchuk, which I don't like as much these days anymore in the last few months, but his older content's really good. James Altucher, the depth of people and the breadth of people that he interviews is phenomenal. In just 30 minutes, and it's free. I might have to listen to an ad about probably actually an Audible ad a lot of times, just kind of odd enough, and then Birchbox and a couple other things. But besides that, it's amazing resource that you get for no money, and that's where I really learned about Jason Fried, right? And I find people who I follow from these podcasts, and Jason Fried's the founder of 37 Signals software company, all this kind of cool stuff. And he said, he did this TED talk about how work is like sleep. And there's this thing called flow or something similar where when you're working on something, you're uninterrupted. Has anyone ever worked on something and been so insanely hyper-focused that you almost completely lose track of time and what's going on around you? I intentionally try to get into that state every day as much as I can. And it's something that you really have to work at to do, because the biggest part is that initial 20 minutes that you have to invest. But he has this great talk about how work is like sleep, right? Which makes a lot of sense. You can work for 8 hours in a day, but if you're constantly disruptive and just switching your attention to different things, you really didn't get anything done, right? I'm sure, has anyone felt like that? You've worked so incredibly hard, but I didn't accomplish anything today, right? And that's something I avidly try to avoid every single day. And it's the reason why you might come by my office and it looks like the lights are off and I'm not there. I am, but there's a reason. And I the Tim Ferriss thing, don't check your email, all that's great. But the biggest thing is realizing about yourself how to be proactive and not reactive. The same way with sleep. If you spend 8 hours in a bed, but someone wakes you up every 15 to 30 minutes, there's a period of time where you have to fall back to sleep before you actually get good quality sleep. Then there's a period of time where you have to come back awake when you context switch. Your mind is the same way in work. When you can really hustle on something and focus on something, and I plan out my day every single day, which is stupid. I even plan out when I might go to lunch. I'm not a planner at all, but I like to see on a schedule because it keeps me accountable, right? It's a system that I've kind of adopted to just keep myself accountable, which I think is a really hard problem for a lot of young entrepreneurs. So that's why I love Huntsville. That's why Huntsville West is so cool. Just talk to anyone here and be like, hey, let's just you just meet them over by the water cooler and you catch up once a month. That's huge. It's been extremely accountable.
As you can see, he's a fantastic storyteller and just a cool human all around. But he did say earlier that he will be available if you guys want to talk to him after this all night. He's going to stick around, so if you have questions, anything else you want to ask him about, need some help. Yeah, I'd love to do a Q&A if they have questions, for sure. I should know we're out of time. All right, 5 quick questions for Q&A. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Bet.
Why did Timo almost fire him?
That's a really good question. It was because I told him, like, either I was like, I'm working at this other job for $40 an hour now, and you either give me $40 an hour and I'm leaving. And he was like, leave. And I was like, does that mean I'm fired? Yes. So Timo was right. He's a really good poker player, I feel like, because and also I'm just bad at bluffing. He called my bluff so fast. He's like, $40 an hour, I'm out of here. He's like, that's the door, don't let it hit you on the way out, bye. You know what I mean? So that's how I almost got fired from Digium.
Yes, sir.
You were going to mention something about a secret society in Huntsville. Curious about what you were going to say.
That's a good question. So we got this offer from Matty Jack. It's like a letter of intent, and then like boom, there was this huge like group of people. It was like, well, maybe I shouldn't name them, but it was like Jim Hudson, Jason Chung, Ben Cobb, Luke Dorian, Marshall, can't remember his last name. Yes, Marshall, yep. Rich Marsden, Lanier Ford, like all these guys that are just in the M&A business and in the know of startups, acquisitions, mergers, and they all just met with me for free. Like, how crazy is this? They were just so excited, like they just love deals and deal flow, helping me negotiate. They were all on my side, and no one charged me anything. It was crazy. And I learned that there's a reason why these guys aren't out there. A lot of them are running their own companies, but a lot of them, they had a successful exit, and they kind of get, for lack of a better term, mauled by people sometimes, right? And that happens to me a little bit sometimes. I love it personally, which is why I kind of put myself in this environment. But like everyone's giving me their 60-second elevator pitch, you know what I mean? I'm like, I just want to learn about you first, you know what I mean? And then see kind of what's going on. And I know a lot of people in Huntsville are the same way. So there's a lot of these huge exits that you guys may have heard of, like around AdTran and software companies and stuff. And then you're like, I wonder what those guys are doing today. They're still here. And they're still very actively investing. They're very active in the startup world. They're just not up here having this talk and passing out their personal cell phone number like I am, because I love it, right? So I view it as my job now is to be that person on the front line, taking the hits on the chins and a whole bunch of crazy stuff, and then kind of just cultivating that pipeline to get that one introduction that, Phil Williams can say, I really want to hang out and like see if I can add value to this company. And that's where the secret society kind of exists. They don't know they're in a secret society, but they are, in my mind. And I would say there's probably 20 or 25 people that I know of that are in that world that are extremely valuable, but they just can't be accessible to everyone. It has to be a little bit curated, just so they can provide the most amount of value to the smallest amount of people. And I think that's kind of a good point. I get to talk to lots of people, but the value I might be able to provide besides a talk like this is relatively low a lot of times. But these guys deep dive, just like what Matt does on these and 3210 does on these different companies, being able to deep dive into your problem and give you real advice, not just generic advice about, the margins thing and blah, 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 but be able to really know your business and help you with specific advice is the community that has been growing in Huntsville, and I'm excited to start exposing what a lot of those pieces look like. But that's part of just being here at Co-working Night, being here at Huntsville West, and like just natural selection and making your way through that channel and get there. But it's a great thing to have in Huntsville that I had no idea existed. It's really cool.
And I think if you're doing something worthwhile, more than likely somebody's going to notice and pass your name along, right?
Or prove them wrong.
Yeah. Any other questions? We have time for just one or two more. Yes, ma'am.
So with an 80 or 90% failure rate, what have you learned from your failures?
I by far learned the most from my failures. I can say that I sold DialMaxx, and I'm like, I am a fucking genius. I mean, I am so smart. God dang. And now I used to have that company, DialMaxx, that little old thing. Now I'm going to start a new company, and now I have money. So instead of like trying to actually be efficient with money and actually learn, I'm just going to spend tons of money, hire all my best friends. We're just going to play Call of Duty and build a company together. That did not work out. Has anyone here heard of Indicator Pro? No, you haven't. Because that was my almost $1 million mistake that I don't talk about too much for obvious reasons. No, I'm just kidding. I love talking about it. That was a huge failure of mine that really taught me a lot of like, man, it's almost like restricting the capital that's in the business, the cash that's in the business is actually kind of important, because you have to be scrappy, you have to be lean. And when you have that cash, you don't have to be as smart, and you just don't realize that you're being an idiot until later, right? But when you only have $1,000 in your bank account, $500, you realize you're an idiot really quickly, right? So I would say that's probably the biggest thing is that I've learned the most from those failures about what I do not want to do in a company, what doesn't work well, and it's always humbling, which I think is a really important part. And whenever I do feel like I get a little bit bigger than my britches, I'm immediately humbled by something. And it's always good to go through that process, and I try to be as observant as I can as possible to that, because failure really is part of the process. And DialMaxx was a good deal, and all these other things have worked out well, but there are definitely 2 or 3 times as many of those that have not worked out, that I either lost money on, lost friendships. There's still some family and friends I don't talk to. You know, that's just a little bit of the price of me making the mistake, but going through that, and I think it was an extremely important piece to get to the other side. It's almost like a qualifier. So you shouldn't be scared of failing. Failing is great because you're making progress towards something. Actually, kind of the worst thing is when you're not failing. When things are going sort of okay, like your ramen noodle profitable is what they call it, ramen profitable, where it's like I can afford to eat ramen noodles, but I'm not really growing this thing very big. That's harder, right? Because it's harder to take that out back and kill it, right? It's easy to take that out back and kill it if you're losing tons of money and like none of your friends or family will talk to you anymore. Oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. But when you have something sort of working, that can really be tough to take out back and say, I need to set down this good opportunity for this great opportunity. And that's something that I struggle with all the time and have since the beginning.
Great question. I think we got time for one more. Anyone else have questions? Yes, sir. You're the instructor.
You posted something on Facebook a couple months ago about non-entrepreneurial choosing priorities, sleep, friends, family, those kind of things. You probably remember. How does that change with the seasons of a startup?
That's a really good question, David. Good to see you, by the way. Looking sharp. I really think a good way to look at startups is that it's in a season. And I remember my mom saying this when I was younger. She was like, you're only a kid once. You know what I mean? Like, why don't you just go out, have fun, go out with your friends or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm building this thing. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's hard to work at a company, just personally like 9 to 5. And I'm like, I'm adding all this value, but my compensation is pretty much fixed or something similar to that, right? But in this, even though I might not be adding immediately monetary value, I'm learning and growing and building something. And that was just so addicting and obsessive. But I learned that there are seasons that you go through, not only in life, but also cyclically with a business as well, where sometimes I did have to put down family and friends, not put them down like a dog or something, I didn't kill anybody, but put them down, like set them aside a little bit in order to prioritize the business. And then there were periods of my life, like after selling DialMaxx for a couple of years, where I really didn't do much of anything entrepreneurial and mainly just hung out with my friends and really pushed that forward. But I think the big thing is to realize that it is cyclical, that there is a time when you really need to push. And that's actually when it's going well. When things are going sort of well, you really need to double down and press the gas as hard as you can to get forward. And I just mentioned this in this post most recently. I'm like, look, guys, I'm sorry, but I am really choosing to try to build Comment Sold and Divas right now. So I will be MIA really for the next 6 months or foreseeable future until I can really put this thing in place and give it the chance that it actually needs to survive. And I think that's really important for entrepreneurs to realize. You don't have to, in getting someone who in here has a spouse, right? So that's a lot of people. It is Alabama. Hopefully they're not your cousin. But I get that joke only because I get the joke all the time from my friends. Well, you guys even have a Walmart down there? Yes, we have several Walmarts. But I think it's kind of tough, and I had to make that choice with Amanda when we were dating also too, to say like, look, it's not that you're not as important as the company, but sometimes the company is more important. And having someone that's supportive in that is incredibly helpful. And I would almost say it's maybe impossible to survive it without a divorce or to survive it at all. If like your mashed potatoes taste a little bit weird, maybe you should check them out. Because you have to have that spouse that's supportive. So I see a lot of entrepreneurs go off and a lot of times the husband's like, I'm not sure if I want my wife to take this opportunity and jump and do this thing, or vice versa. I don't know, if I want my husband to take this opportunity and try to do a startup. As long as you have that support system in place, it will work out pretty well. But that's been really tough for me, to talk to people that aren't entrepreneurs and tell them, hey man, I love you, but I can't. There's this one of the really good books that has helped shape me in the last 5 years, I would say, is Essentialism. It's like kind of learning the art of saying no.